The town of Ridgeville had one mechanic shop, and it sat between an old diner and a feed store. Inside, the smell of grease, oil, and sweat mixed with the faint sound of classic rock playing from a dusty radio. That was where 17-year-old Emily grew up, sweeping floors beside her father, Earl. She didn't have fancy tools, but she had time, patience, and a quiet obsession with engines. Earl never asked her to fix things, but he never stopped her either. He would catch her staring too long at intake valves, or watching YouTube videos under the glow of a hanging shop bulb late into the night. Sometimes she'd hand him the right wrench before he asked. Sometimes she'd whisper, "That carburetor's leaking," before he noticed. He'd just nod and smile to himself. He knew she was learning in silence, and that was enough. At Ridgeville Tech High, most of the boys in shop class laughed when Emily spoke up. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy, but she always listened. During a tour of a local engineering program, the students were shown something legendary, an engine designed by a group of NASA dropouts that had never run. It had baffled instructors, mechanics, and students alike for 5 years. It sat there like a monument to impossible ideas. One of the richer kids, Jason, whose father owned half the real estate in town, leaned over and muttered just loud enough, "Hey, Emily, why don't you fix it, since you know everything?" His friends laughed. The instructor smirked but didn't stop them. Emily looked at the engine, then at Jason. She didn't respond. She just walked toward it. The instructor's voice cut in, half joking. "It's a museum piece now, sweetheart. Nobody's ever gotten it to fire. Even the original designers gave up." Emily said nothing. She studied it closely. The boys kept watching, some nudging each other. Another voice chimed in. This one belonged to a woman in a pantsuit with a clipboard. "She wants to try." "Let her. There's no harm in watching another failure." The instructor sighed and handed over a pair of gloves and a flashlight. Emily tied her hair back with a rag from her jacket pocket. She ran her hand along the edge of the engine. Her eyes traced the fuel lines, the intake ports, the crankshaft position sensor. Her father once told her engines were like puzzles. They always gave up their secrets if you knew where to look. Jason crossed his arms. "She won't even find the starter, bet you." Emily kept moving. A few other students, mostly quiet ones, leaned in. One of them whispered, "She's really going to do it." The instructor checked his watch. "We've got 30 minutes left before the tour ends. You've got till then." Emily didn't rush. She asked for a wrench set and an OBD scanner. Her voice was calm but firm. The instructor handed them over. Minutes passed. Jason got bored and pulled out his phone. A few of the others started filming, expecting a moment to laugh about later. But Emily wasn't fumbling. She was removing covers, tracing circuits, blowing dust from sensor ports. She removed a connector, cleaned it with a cloth from her pocket, reconnected it, and moved on. No hesitation. Someone said, "I think she knows what she's doing." Jason snorted. "She's pretending. This is a stunt." Emily disconnected the battery. Then she pointed at the main relay fuse. "This isn't stock," she said to no one in particular. "It's an override. Somebody installed it backward." The instructor frowned and moved closer. She replaced the fuse with one from her bag, reconnected the battery, and asked for ignition access. The instructor hesitated, then handed over the keys. "You're serious?" Emily didn't answer. She inserted the key and turned it halfway. The fuel pump clicked on, a sound it hadn't made in 5 years. Someone gasped. Jason looked up from his phone. Emily turned the key fully. The engine coughed once, then fell silent. She waited, adjusted the throttle, tapped the ignition again. This time it roared to life. Not for long, maybe 6 seconds. But it ran. The room went silent. Emily stepped back and handed over the keys. Then she walked toward the exit without a word. Behind her, the instructor stared at the engine, blinking. Jason's phone was no longer filming. A woman in the back with the clipboard made a call and said only 4 words. "Find out her name." Emily didn't speak a word on the ride home. Her father, Earl, had picked her up in the old red pickup, same one they'd used to haul tires and scrap metal since she was 10. She stared out the window. He didn't ask questions, just glanced over once with a proud smile she pretended not to see. The next day, the phone at their garage rang non-stop. Local reporters, school administration, a representative from the state engineering board. All wanted to confirm what they'd heard, that a mechanic's daughter had started an engine thought to be impossible. Earl just handed the phone to Emily each time. "It's for you," he'd say with a chuckle. She answered quietly, respectfully, never sounding surprised. It was as if she already knew what she'd done. Word spread faster than wildfire, and someone else had been listening. The same woman in the pantsuit who had made the phone call stood in a quiet, glass-walled conference room in Chicago. Her name was Miranda Lowe, VP of Research Investment at a major tech firm. She played the security footage back again. A teenage girl, calm, precise, rewiring and reworking a failed design like she'd built it herself. Miranda leaned forward, tapped a button, and called her assistant. "Get her here," she said, "today." Back in Ridgeville, a black SUV pulled up outside the mechanic shop just before noon. Emily was under a car, her boots sticking out. Earl was balancing brake pads on a shelf. A man in a suit stepped out of the SUV. "Emily Walker?" he asked. She slid out, grease on her face. "Yes." "You're requested in Chicago. Expenses covered. They want to see what you can do tomorrow morning." Earl looked at her. Emily didn't hesitate. She wiped her hands and said, "I'll be ready." The next morning, she stood in front of a panel of engineers twice her age. The room was cold, clinical, full of polished metal and blinking lights. On the table sat another prototype, newer, sleeker, and even more complicated. One of the men in the room spoke. "We're told you diagnosed the Ridgeville prototype in under 30 minutes. If you can explain this design flaw, we'll fund your education entirely. If not, we appreciate your effort." Emily walked up to the engine. She didn't answer him. Instead, she ran her fingers lightly across the alloy surface, feeling for imperfections. The room watched, silently. 5 minutes passed, then 10. A younger engineer leaned to his colleague. "She's just guessing." Emily turned suddenly. "You installed the camshaft sensor on the intake side. It should have been exhaust side synchronized. That's why timing's off by 30 degrees. The lead engineer blinked. "How do you know that?" "Because your ECU readouts show misfire on cylinder 2, even though compression's fine. That only happens when phase angle's off." The room fell quiet. Someone scribbled something. Miranda entered just then, holding a folder. "She's right," she said. "We ran diagnostics this morning. Her analysis matches ours and goes further." Emily stood still. Miranda walked over, opened the folder, and handed Emily a letter. "This is a full scholarship to MIT. Paid internship each summer with us. Housing, travel, stipend. No conditions except that you keep doing what you just did. Think differently." Emily took the letter, her hands shaking slightly. She looked back toward the door, where Earl had just entered quietly. He stood in his worn boots, hat in his hand, unsure if he should step in. Miranda noticed. "Is that your father?" Emily nodded. Miranda turned to Earl. "Sir, your daughter is extraordinary. You should be very proud." Earl nodded slowly. "I always was," he said. On the drive home, Emily held the envelope in her lap. Earl didn't speak for the first few miles. Then softly he said, "You know, I used to dream of fixing something big, something that mattered. I guess you're doing that for both of us now." Emily smiled, finally letting herself feel it. In Ridgeville, Jason scrolled through a news article featuring Emily's photo. He turned off his phone and said nothing. At the garage, the phone kept ringing. New clients, new sponsors. A TV show wanted to visit. Earl stuck a "Close Today" sign on the door. Emily sat on the shop floor, where she used to sweep up bolts. she pulled out the blueprint of the first engine she ever fixed. On the bottom corner, she wrote one word in pen: possible.